Hey everybody, I'm Scott Butwell and welcome to my YouTube channel. And in this video, I'm going to talk about what I feel is one of the most important aspects of writing online. And the most important aspect of writing online to me is how to create a really good title to your blog post or article. Because if you think about it, the title or headline is basically the door to your story. And if you don't have a good title to your story, no one is even going to click on it and read it. So I think sometimes myself and pretty much every writer is probably guilty of not thinking enough about how important that headline is to get people to actually click on your story. So the most important part of a headline is to get people to actually click on your story. And so I'm thinking specifically in this video about writers on medium.com. If you know, or maybe you don't know, Medium is a blogging platform where writers are paid when other members of Medium read their articles. So for Medium writers, it's very important to have that good title because people aren't even going to click on it, and you're not going to get paid for other readers reading your story unless you have a really good title. So here are 6 tips to create really good blog titles that people will want to click on.
Tip number 1, keep it simple.
You know how it works when you're scrolling through stories on Medium or on the internet. You're just kind of scrolling, looking for those titles that might capture your attention. I think you're really giving each title like 1 second, and it really, to me, says that we need to keep our titles really, really simple, because if it's complicated, confusing, your brain's not even going to process what that title's about and if you want to read it. So I like to keep mine simple. I usually try to keep them between like 5 and 10 words, because I think that's just the amount of words and thoughts that someone can digest real quick to see if they want to read it or not. So keep it simple. That's probably one of my most important thoughts on this, is keep it simple so people know exactly what your story is going to be about in that 1 second that they're actually looking at your title.
Tip number 2, who, what, why, and how.
This tip is probably the one I use the most for my headlines, and I got this from Linda Carroll. Who represents who is your story for, or who is your story about. What is really what your story is about, so readers should really get a sense for the who and what your story is about from your headline. And also the why. Why should someone read this story? What benefit or value will they get from reading your story? To me, that's the most important one, and it's probably also the most hardest one, is what benefit will someone get from it? People are really driven for practical values a lot when they're reading. They want to see what they're going to get from your story. So if you can emphasize that value or benefit a reader is going to get, that's most important. And also, this is the hardest one too, is the wow. That title should really kind of have that wow feeling that kind of grabs your attention. Usually for me, I've noticed this comes from maybe emotionally connotative words that have a little sizzle, a little spiciness to them. You don't want to overdo it, but you definitely want to get that wow feeling, that feeling that someone's just stopped in their tracks because there's something intriguing about your story. So it's who, what, why, and wow.
Tip number 3, avoid clickbait titles.
Obviously, we just talked about creating wow titles that make you want to click on them. But there's a fine line here between a title that makes you want to click on it, that has some maybe emotional, connotative words, and those that are clickbaity. The clickbaity ones, you've seen them on Medium. Someone who makes an absurd, false promise. Here's one: how I make $7,000 a month by writing about boring subjects. Not many people are making $7,000 a month. You'd have to have, a ton of followers. You can look at your own stats to know how much money you're making per month. But those kind of articles those kind of titles you really want to avoid, because people will remember. You make that kind of false promise, people are not going to read your future stories. So to me, a good headline, it makes a promise and it delivers on that promise, and it's something that's true. It's not, these kind of gross hyperboles that aren't true. I remember another story I read, it had a word digital nomad in it, and I was excited to read it. It had that nice kind of connotation to digital nomad, something we all want to be. And then I didn't really see the rest of the story about digital nomads. So be careful what you say in your title, because people will remember, and you want them not to have that bad memory.
Tip number 4, tell who is the authority.
Another thing you can do to have really good titles is to emphasize the source of the information people are about to read about. I think people really appreciate if they know like you're the source of information using I in your title, or maybe there's another source. You know, maybe it's your mother or your boss that's the source of information, or a writer, you know, who has certain credentials. So anytime you're able to kind of give a reader a little bit of a clue about where your information is coming from, I think that's definitely beneficial. I know I would like that as a reader. So think about adding the source of information, where your information is coming from in your titles.
Tip number 5, create 10 potential headlines.
I've heard this tip said by many other medium writers, and it's one I think a lot of people don't do but would be really beneficial, and that is creating 10 potential headlines for your story. I think this little extra bit of time can help you really evaluate which title is the best. You know, sometimes we get done writing a story, we're happy, we're finished, and we just want to kind of hit the publish button or hit the submit button. But I think if we take that little extra time, that's really where you can double the amount of reads. Yes, you can double the amount of reads by having a really good title. So I did this with my last story that I did. It was on Bronny and Bryce James. That's the sons of LeBron James. And I came up with 10 different titles. Here's a few. No Chill Summer for Bronny and Bryce James. Bryce and Bronny James have a big summer ahead. Bronny and Bryce James putting in the work this summer. So the story was focused on this summer, and it took me about the 7th one where I finally got the one that I liked, and it was from sharing it with my brother, you know, so he was able to tell me one that he would click on, so that really helped. The title I came up with was I Know What Bronny and Bryce James Are Doing This Summer. It's both a song title and a movie title, so it has that kind of pop culture reference. And again, I only got that title because I took that time to get 10 different titles to think which one's the best. I did a little research, Googling song titles and movie titles related to the word summer. So it's a good strategy. Create a list of 10 titles and you might get a lot better title. I just want to end by sharing some of my top titles to stories so you can kind of see by some examples what I've been talking about. So here's one I think that's very clear on what the story is going to be about. How to write a book review that doesn't sound like a book report. Again, simple, tells what the story is about. That's kind of what you want in a headline. Here's another one. I'm addicted to reading about first kisses in the memoirist. Again, first kisses kind of has that connotation feel like, hey, this is about first kisses. That sounds interesting, probably awkward. Here's a couple other ones. How to write about your spouse without wrecking your marriage. Any kind of stories that have that how-to in the title tend to do well on Medium because you're kind of informing it's a how-to. And people might have that problem of writing about a spouse without wrecking their marriage. So that's a good one. Another one is how to write 5 stories from reading one book. That has that kind of intrigue quality. Like, how do you get 5 stories from one book? It's possible. I've done it. Here's another one. Let me see here. Here's a really simple one. Again, I said tip number 1 was simple. Yahoo! I'm in the big leagues. That's one where I was talking about being published in a big publication. Something simple like that, you know, tells what it's about in that little 1-second time frame when people are looking at your title, it tends to do well. Again, really short titles, I said, do well. Depression hides in plain sight. Simple, 5 words, it tells what the story is about. Is the algorithm a sports fan? I usually don't use questions, but again, keywords like algorithm, sports fan, being short, and hopefully getting that kind of curiosity in the reader are really important. Here's one with a little bit of emotional connotation in it. I rescued my mom from hospice care. So it kind of has that emotional word rescue that makes the reader kind of want to see, you know, what happened. And here's one last one, 10 almost famous quotes that will help you be bolder in your writing. There's that part where you're adding the benefit to the reader. Quotes that help you be bolder in your writing. You're emphasizing how to get bolder. All right, that's my 6 tips on how to write better blog titles to get people to actually click on your story. That's what it's all about. So every time you write your title, just ask yourself, will people actually click on this? Does it tell what the story is going to be about? And let me ask you to do one thing. If you haven't already, click on subscribe so you can get more videos like this. It will help you be a better writer on medium.com.